The judge didn't even look up when he said the word fraud. My brother froze. His wife dropped her phone. Their perfect life collapsed in one sentence. They thought this was bad luck. They thought someone betrayed them. But this wasn't an accident. This was revenge. And to understand how my own family ended up in handcuffs, you need to know what they did to me first. Betrayed by the people you trusted most. Family, friends, loved ones, gone in a heartbeat. Hit like if you crave justice. Subscribe to Intiqara Revenge Stories. And share your own betrayal story in the comments because every secret comes back to light. Before everything collapsed, my name was Ryan Caldwell. I was 35, living in the sun-baked suburbs of Dallas, Texas, and running a growing auto repair business I had built with my bare hands. I wasn't born into money or comfort. I grew up in a trailer park with a father who drank his paychecks away, and a mother who scrubbed other people's houses just so we could eat. When my parents died in a car accident, they left behind nothing of value except responsibility. And most of that responsibility landed on me. Especially when it came to my younger brother, Derek. Derek was everything I wasn't. Where I was grease-stained and quiet, he was clean-cut and charming. People liked him instantly. Teachers, friends, strangers, everyone saw potential in Derek. So when the insurance payout came through, I didn't hesitate. I used that money to send him to business school, telling myself that one day we'd build something together. Something that would finally break the cycle we grew up in. While he studied balance sheets and marketing terms, I worked 14-hour days under car lifts, fingers cracked and bleeding, lungs filled with oil fumes. By the time Derek graduated, I had turned a rundown garage into a real business. When I brought him in as a partner, I meant it. I trusted him like family because he was. For a while, it worked. Caldwell Auto Repairs grew from 1 location to 5. We were finally making real money. That's when Derek started talking bigger. About expansion. About investors. About becoming an empire. Around that same time, he married Mia. She was sharp, polished, and ambitious in a way that made people lean in when she spoke. She talked about branding and scaling like she was doing us a favor. I thought she was helping. I didn't realize she was watching. Studying how everything worked. Studying me. The changes were subtle at first. Derek started traveling more. Business trips that stretched into weekends. Mia began showing up at the garages when I wasn't around, suggesting I was too hands-on to old school. You should trust Derek more, she'd say with a smile that felt supportive on the surface. And I did. That trust cost me everything. One night, they sat me down and told me about a major investor opportunity. Huge money. Huge growth. All they needed was capital to look strong on paper. Just paperwork, they said. Temporary. I signed. I didn't know I was signing away my life. 3 weeks later, I came back from a roadside repair to find the main office stripped bare. Computers wiped. Files gone. Accounts drained. Every dollar business funds, loan money, even the equity from my house vanished. My phone exploded with calls from banks and suppliers, all asking the same question I couldn't answer. Where did the money go? Then I saw the photos. Derek and Mia in Miami, on a yacht, laughing, drinking champagne, living like royalty. Together, my brother, my sister-in-law, my money, my business, my future, all gone. I lost my house first, then my reputation. Friends stopped calling. I slept on a borrowed couch staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every warning sign I ignored. The humiliation hurt worse than the poverty. I wasn't just broke, I was erased. One night, during a thunderstorm that rattled the windows like judgment, I opened my old toolbox. Inside were blueprints, contracts, Systems I had designed myself back when this was nothing but an idea. And in that moment, something inside me finally snapped not into rage, but clarity. They didn't just steal from me. They built their entire empire on my fingerprints. Which meant one thing. They weren't untouchable. They were already guilty. I just had to prove it. The next few weeks were the darkest stretch of my life. Not because I was completely broken, but because Derek and Mia made sure I felt broken. They didn't just disappear with my money. They stayed visible, loud, smug, almost daring me to react. Derek updated his LinkedIn every few days with posts about bold leadership and weathering storms. Mia flooded Instagram with curated shots of luxury sunsets on balconies, designer heels by infinity pools, captions about manifestation and hustle. Meanwhile, I was rationing gas money and pretending not to notice eviction notices taped to my former front door. It felt intentional, like they wanted me to watch them live the life they stole. When I finally worked up the nerve to confront Derek, his response shattered whatever illusion of brotherhood I still clung to. He answered my call casually, like we were old coworkers catching up, not family. He told me I was overreacting, that the business had evolved, that I should have kept up. When I mentioned the money, the house, the loans in my name, he actually laughed and said, "You signed everything, Ryan. That's how business works." Then Mia took the phone. Her voice was calm, almost bored. She told me I needed to stop being emotional, stop embarrassing myself, and accept that some people were meant to lead while others were meant to work with their hands. That was the moment I realized they weren't sorry. They weren't even nervous. They thought they'd won. What made it worse was how they rewrote the story publicly. Through whispers to suppliers, vague posts, and carefully placed conversations, they painted me as unstable, burnt out, bad with money, a liability they'd been forced to cut loose. A few former contacts stopped replying to my emails. One even told me, gently, that it might be better if I took time to get myself together. I wanted to scream. They didn't just steal my business, they stole my credibility. And without credibility, you're invisible. I tried to fight back the normal way at first. Lawyers, emails, documentation. That illusion lasted about a week. Every attorney I spoke to wanted retainers I couldn't afford. Every path forward seemed blocked by contracts Derek had convinced me to sign. Clauses buried so deep they felt designed to humiliate me later. At night, I lay awake replaying Mia's voice in my head, calm, superior, dismissive. The worst part wasn't the loss. It was the gaslighting, being told this was my fault, that I was weak, that I deserved it, and while I struggled just to stay afloat, they doubled down. Derek announced a flashy rebrand of the company using a modified version of my own last name. Mia began hosting networking events, positioning herself as the face of the business, the visionary woman behind the success. They didn't just move on. They built their image on top of my grave. That's when the fear finally burned out and something colder took its place. I stopped asking how to get my life back. I started asking a different question. What did I know that they'd forgotten? The answer was everything. I knew the shortcuts Derek took because I'd warned him against them. I knew which inspections were rushed, which paperwork had been temporarily adjusted, which vendors had been paid late and convinced to stay quiet. I knew the systems because I'd built them, every login, every workaround, every fragile connection holding their shiny empire together. While they were busy enjoying stolen luxury, I was remembering, observing, reconstructing. I didn't feel powerful yet, but I felt focused. And that scared me more than the anger ever did. They thought I was finished. They thought I was licking my wounds, too ashamed to show my face. And that was the mistake that sealed their fate. Because while they were celebrating, I was becoming invisible. And invisible people don't fight loudly. They plan. By the time I stopped feeling sorry for myself, something fundamental had shifted inside me. The sadness burned off first. Then the panic. What remained was a steady, almost unsettling calm. I wasn't dreaming about confronting Derek anymore. I wasn't rehearsing speeches or imagining apologies that would never come. I was thinking in systems, in timelines, in consequences. That's when I knew I had crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was preparing. I started small, so small, it felt pointless at first. Public records. Business registrations. Licensing databases. Late at night, sitting in public libraries or diners with weak Wi-Fi, I pulled everything tied to Derek and Mia's new operation. The more I dug, the uglier it became. Shell companies stacked on top of each other. Rapid expansions that made no financial sense. Permits approved suspiciously fast. It wasn't clean growth. It was rushed, sloppy, and arrogant. They were moving too fast because they thought no one was watching. That was their second mistake. Then I remembered something Derek had forgotten. He'd always hated paperwork. Back when we worked together, I was the one who built the back-end systems, vendor logins, internal reporting tools, maintenance tracking software. To Derek, those things were boring. To me, they were blueprints. And most of those systems hadn't been rebuilt. They'd been copied, cloned, sloppily updated with new logos and flashy dashboards. One old admin credential still worked. I didn't celebrate when it did. I just stared at the screen, heart thudding, realizing how exposed they really were. I didn't steal anything. I didn't change anything. I watched. I mapped. I documented. I learned which suppliers were being paid with borrowed money, which investors were being reassured with fake projections, which numbers were being shifted just enough to avoid immediate alarms. Mia's fingerprints were everywhere, polished presentations, masking structural rot. Derek signed off on everything without reading it. The empire they bragged about was held together by lies and momentum. And momentum always runs out. There were moments I almost stopped. Late nights when I questioned what this was turning me into. When I imagined Derek's face if he ever realized what I was doing. When I thought about the kid he used to be, the brother I taught how to ride a bike. But then I'd remember the way he laughed on that phone call. The way Mia told me I was meant to work with my hands. The way they erased me. And the doubt would harden into resolve. The breaking point came quietly. No shouting. No dramatic confrontation. Just a single email I stumbled across while monitoring investor communications. Mia had written it, casually explaining delays by blaming operational mismanagement under previous leadership. My name wasn't mentioned. But I knew exactly who she meant. That was the moment I stopped thinking of them as family at all. They weren't my brother and sister-in-law anymore. They were liabilities who had built their success on a lie. And lies collapse best when exposed to daylight. So I began assembling a file. Not one document, hundreds, screenshots, time-stamped reports, email chains, financial inconsistencies, cross-referenced against public filings. I didn't send anything yet. I didn't threaten. I didn't hint. I let them keep expanding, keep boasting, keep attracting attention. Every new location, every new investor, every new post was another brick stacked on a foundation I already knew was cracked. They thought they were untouchable. I knew they were building higher just to fall harder. By the time Derek posted a photo from a black-tie investor gala, grinning like a king who'd conquered the world, my file was complete. I closed my laptop and sat there in the quiet, listening to the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. For the first time since they destroyed my life, I smiled. Not because I was happy, but because the plan no longer needed me. It would move on its own. All I had to do now was choose the moment to let go. By the time their empire started showing hairline cracks, Derek and Mia were too drunk on success to notice. That was the most dangerous stage right before gravity remembers you exist. Investors kept coming. Locations kept opening. And every expansion stretched their already fragile structure thinner. They compensated the only way arrogant people ever do: louder confidence, sharper blame, tighter control. Anyone who questioned numbers was labeled negative. Anyone who slowed them down was quietly pushed out. Watching it unfold felt surreal, like standing on the shoulder of a highway while a car sped toward a concrete wall with its headlights off. I stayed invisible. That was the hardest part. Every instinct in me wanted to act, to expose them immediately, to scream the truth into the world. But revenge isn't about speed. It's about timing. So I waited. I listened. I let their own pressure turn them reckless. Suppliers started grumbling about late payments. A regional manager quit suddenly and signed an NDA that reeked of panic. Derek began snapping in meetings, his charm cracking when things didn't go his way. Mia, compensated by tightening her grip, rewriting procedures overnight, forcing employees to sign updated contracts without time to review them. They were scared. They just didn't know why yet. That fear made them sloppy. Derek reused passwords. Mia forwarded sensitive documents through unsecured emails because she was too busy to care. I watched the internal tension rise like steam in an overheated engine. And then came the moment that told me the window was opening. A mid-level investor replied to one of Mia's glossy update emails with a single line: "Can you clarify these discrepancies?" It was polite, professional, and it terrified her. I knew because she overreacted, sending a rambling explanation filled with just enough contradictions to hang herself later. I added it to the file. The first move wasn't dramatic. It wasn't public. It was a whisper. An anonymous tip to a regulatory body that was already understaffed and overworked, but thorough when given specifics. I didn't accuse. I didn't rant. I simply pointed them toward patterns. Irregular growth, financial inconsistencies, employee turnover masked as restructuring. It was the kind of breadcrumb trail that didn't trigger alarms immediately but once followed, couldn't be unfollowed. Then I stepped back again. Let the gears turn. The change was subtle at first. Derek complained to someone about random audits. Mia posted less. Their smiles and photos became tighter, more forced. A supplier quietly suspended deliveries pending clarification. Derek blamed the economy. Mia blamed incompetence beneath her. Neither of them blamed themselves, which was exactly what I was counting on. People who never accept responsibility always leave the same fingerprints everywhere they touch. There was a night, weeks later, when I almost ruined everything. I got a call from a blocked number. I didn't answer. It rang again, and again. Finally, I picked up. Derek's voice came through, low and sharp. He didn't accuse me outright. He didn't need to. He said my name, the way you say a word you've been chewing on too long. He asked how I was doing. Asked if I'd moved on. Told me he hoped I wasn't holding on to resentment because it wasn't healthy. I hung up without responding, my hands shaking not from fear, but from the realization that he felt it. He didn't know what was coming, but he knew something was wrong. After that, I accelerated carefully. I connected dots for people who were already suspicious. Former employees. Vendors who'd been pressured into silence. I didn't tell them what to think. I just showed them what I had. One by one, they stopped protecting Derek and Mia. Lawsuits began forming quietly, still out of the public eye. The pressure behind the scenes intensified. Derek started drinking more. Mia started snapping at staff in meetings she didn't realize were being documented. The masks were cracking, and through it all, I stayed quiet. No posts, no statements, no visible presence. I wasn't interested in confrontation. I was interested in inevitability. They thought I was gone broken, humiliated, erased. What they didn't understand was that being erased gave me the perfect cover. I wasn't fighting them head-on. I was letting them collapse under the weight of what they'd built. And soon, very soon, the fall would become impossible to hide. By the time the pressure became visible to the outside world, Derek and Mia were already in survival mode. You could see it in the way they moved, less confidence, more urgency. Meetings that used to be celebratory turned tense. Conversations that once ended with laughter now ended in silence. They were still smiling for the cameras, still posting curated moments of success, but the rhythm was off. When people feel hunted, they rush. And when they rush, they make irreversible mistakes. The first public crack came from a place they never expected, one of their own investors. Not a big one. Just significant enough to matter. He filed a civil complaint citing material misrepresentation. That phrase spread fast. It didn't accuse them outright, but it planted a seed. Journalists noticed. Regulators took another look. Suppliers tightened terms. And suddenly, Derek and Mia weren't being celebrated anymore. They were being questioned. Every interview felt like an interrogation. Every email carried a tone of quiet suspicion. I watched it unfold from the sidelines. My file now mirrored across secure locations. My involvement buried so deep it no longer mattered. Behind closed doors, their relationship began to rot. The pressure they'd once turned outward started turning inward. Derek blamed Mia for pushing too hard, too fast. Mia blamed Derek for being careless, for signing things he didn't understand. Voices rose. Doors slammed. Staff learned to keep their heads down. Meetings ended abruptly when tempers flared. I didn't feel satisfaction watching that part. Just confirmation. Empires built on betrayal don't fracture evenly, they cannibalize themselves. Mia tried to regain control the only way she knew how, doubling down on appearances. She booked high-profile events, posted louder affirmations, and insisted everything was temporary noise. But desperation leaks. Brands she partnered with began distancing themselves. Invitations stopped coming. Derek, once the charming frontman, became defensive and volatile. One leaked voicemail, him shouting at a financial advisor, circulated quietly among people who mattered. Another piece added to the pattern. Another thread pulling the fabric apart. That's when I made the final adjustment. Not an exposure. Not a confrontation. A confirmation. I released the completed dossier to the one place that couldn't ignore it and wouldn't warn them first. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't vindictive. It was clinical. A clean, chronological map of how their empire functioned and why it was fraudulent at its core. I didn't need to exaggerate. The truth was already devastating enough. Once it was submitted, there was nothing left for me to do. The process would take over from there. Slowly, publicly, permanently. The fallout didn't explode immediately. It crept. Accounts were frozen pending review. Expansion plans were paused. Legal fees mounted. Derek started missing public appearances. Mia stopped posting altogether. The silence spoke louder than any accusation. People sensed it. Something was wrong. And this time, they couldn't smile their way out of it. I found out about the arrests the same way everyone else did, through a breaking news alert. Fraud charges. Conspiracy. Multiple counts. The headline didn't mention me. It didn't need to. I sat there staring at the screen, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Not joy, not revenge, relief. The kind that settles into your chest when the world finally acknowledges the truth you carried alone. As they were led out in handcuffs, cameras flashing, their expressions told the real story. Confusion, panic, and beneath it all recognition. Not of me, but of inevitability. They had thought they were smarter than consequences. Thought family was something you could exploit and discard. Standing there, watching their perfect image collapse in real time, I realized something important. I hadn't destroyed them. I had simply stopped protecting the lie that kept them standing. After the arrests, the world didn't magically fix itself. Karma never works like that. It doesn't hand you your old life back, neatly restored. What it does is clear the poison out of the system so you can finally breathe again. The days following the news were strangely quiet. My phone buzzed with messages from people who had written me off months earlier, former partners, old acquaintances, even a couple of employees who'd believed the story Derek and Mia sold about me. Some apologized. Some pretended nothing had happened and just checked in. I didn't respond to most of them. I wasn't angry anymore. I just didn't need them. The legal fallout dragged on, exactly the way it should have. Courtrooms, filings, testimony, evidence stacked so high it crushed every attempt Derek's lawyers made to spin a narrative. Mia tried once. She leaned into the image she'd perfected, composed, articulate, misunderstood. But facts don't care about polish. Emails don't forget. Numbers don't lie when they're lined up properly. Every time she tried to distance herself, another document surfaced with her name on it. Derek fared worse. Without Mia managing appearances, his charm collapsed completely. He looked smaller in court. Older, like someone who'd finally realized confidence doesn't equal control. I never testified publicly. I didn't need to. My role was never meant to be visible. The system did exactly what I trusted it to do once it had the truth. Sentences were handed down. Assets seized. The empire they'd flaunted dissolved into legal proceedings and restitution funds. That yacht, those condos, the designer suits, all gone, liquidated, redistributed, turned into line items in a settlement meant to repair damage they'd sworn didn't exist. Rebuilding my own life happened quietly. No announcements. No comeback speeches. I took consulting work, at first small jobs, honest work. Eventually, I opened a modest shop under a different name. No flashy branding. No empire talk. Just quality work and transparency. Customers came back slowly. Trust always does. I bought a small house. Nothing extravagant. Just solid. Warm. Mine. On Sundays, I cooked chili using my mother's old recipe, the one Derek once joked we'd franchise. I never did. Some things aren't meant to be scaled. I thought about Derek sometimes. Not with hatred. With distance. Blood ties don't dissolve easily, even when they're poisoned. But I no longer felt responsible for him. That weight was gone. Family, I learned, isn't defined by who shares your last name. It's defined by who doesn't exploit your trust when you're vulnerable. Who doesn't mistake kindness for weakness. Who doesn't rewrite history to justify betrayal. The strangest part was the silence after it was all over. No more planning. No more vigilance. Just space. In that space, I realized the revenge wasn't the collapse. It wasn't the handcuffs or the headlines. It was the moment I stopped seeing myself the way they wanted me to, broken, inferior, disposable, and started seeing myself clearly again. I hadn't won by destroying them. I'd won by refusing to disappear. So if you're listening to this, and you're in that place right now, the place where betrayal has hollowed you out and made you doubt, you're worth. Remember this. The people who hurt you are betting on your silence. On your shame. On you giving up. You don't have to scream. You don't have to rush. Sometimes the strongest move you can make is to step back, pay attention, and let the truth do what it always does in the end. If this story gave you that quiet, satisfying sense of justice, the kind that lingers, hit like, subscribe to Intiqara Revenge Stories, and share your own story in the comments. You never know who needs to hear it. Karma is patient, and it always collects.